Good morning. Before I begin, normally when I speak to in a church, I speak to a group, I wear my robes, long black things, long sleeves. I decided I'm not going to make you any hotter looking at me. So I'm wearing my casa, sort of my casa. Ministers here wear sashes, we wear a casa. In her book, Standing on the Edge, Finding Freedom Where Fear and Courage Meet, Roshi Joan Halifax delves into edge states, into altruism, empathy, integrity, respect, and engagement, assets of a mind and heart that exemplify caring, connection, virtue, and strength, and of sometimes losing our firm footing on the high edge of any of these qualities and sliding into the mire of suffering where we find ourselves caught into the waters, toxic and chaotic, of an edge state. Well, I marched with Father Grappi back then. What did you ever do? And then going on and on about how wonderful they were to have done that. Donate to such and such cause or organization, you'll feel so much better. A counselor, psychologist, nurse, doctor, minister, burning out from all the care and help they provided. Having so much integrity that you become overbearing, narcissistic. More than just a don't do it book, Roshi illustrates her approaches with personal observations and stories. Her compassion is woven through every page, and I highly recommend it. But me, being me, I just can't put the book down and walk away. I need to go deeper. I don't make a habit of looking in the mirror in the morning. It can be pretty scary. I'm sleepy-eyed, unwashed, my hair's every which way, especially before I got it cut. And when I do look, who's that guy? Where's the 25-year-old I still imagine myself to be? Oh, I know who I am, what age, the memories and all, but still, it's that vision I have in my mind that's not in the mirror. And it makes me think, do I really know who I am? I should. I've lived with myself pretty closely the last 75 years. And I know I'm smart. Don told you that my Korean name was Haikwang. It means wisdom river. And I've been called a wise ass so many times, it must be true. And yet, what we know of ourselves is a complicated thing. We deceive ourselves, make ourselves out to be better than we actually are, or worse. Changing the reality of our experiences to fit our ego, or a lack of it. I'm an introvert. Really? You have no idea the anxiety I go through from the day before I'm scheduled to deliver a sermon, and as it gets worse through the night, and then being introduced right before I have to get up and actually deliver it. And I've been doing this for almost 30 years. But here I am. I remember talking to Bob Porter about it and remarking, you know, I've come to the conclusion that I'm scared because I care about what I'm going to say, how it may help in some way. If I'm not scared, it means I don't care. And if I don't care, I don't deserve the honor of being behind the pulpit. But what lies around and beyond the edges of that mirror, that morning mirror that you look into? Your parents, absence of a parent or parents, their influences, good or bad, they become a part of who we are. Me? I can sum up my parental influences by saying everything I learned about how not to raise kids, I learned from my dad. I say that with all apologies to the UU minister and author, Robert Fulgham. Influences from grandparents, aunts, uncles, great-grandparents, their interactions, from friends, fellow employees, acquaintances, DNA. Perhaps I should expand my good morning by adding, buenos dias, dzień dobry, ohayo, boker tov, bonjour, guten morgen. DNA, you may inherit some traits through DNA, but really, it's a crapshoot. I found it immensely helpful when I did my genealogical researches, but actual influences, grain of salt. One of many questionable traits of my DNA analysis is the 100% chance of my not getting TB. Don't say I never gave you anything, my dad said after I found out I had contracted TB from him. I still can't donate blood. Before that, I don't remember the incident. My mom told me about it. Before we left the Whidbey Islands Naval Base in Washington, where my dad had been stationed and I was born, I came back from visiting my older lady friend who used to tell me stories. I would run across the street to visit her every day and she would tell me stories. Well, I came back and I told my mom I was unhappy because I couldn't wake her. I was 2-ish at the time. We had to leave quickly to take the train to Milwaukee, and my mom said I developed a fever on the train on the way back. On arriving in Milwaukee, there was a telegram informing my parents that that older lady had died from meningitis. My memories begin during my year-long stay at Children's Hospital. Spinal meningitis scarred my cochlear nerve, making me deaf in my right ear. I mention the meningitis and TB and the long hospital stay because of the effect they had on who I am today. The isolation in the hospital, the bars across my crib because of all the attempts I would make to escape the hospital, and the nurses would have to drag me back. And what about what we are around the edges of that mirror that maybe scares us or makes us laugh? What others see us to be. Sometimes it's like we are two different people. We think we do or say the right things, but others might not feel the same way. We think we did or said something wrong while others disagree. We believe ourselves to be kind and gentle when others think we're brash, a self-centered jerk. Life is so complicated. I mentioned my past, the things we may or may not have known that you may or may not have known about me. What things are in your past that have influenced who you are? What about the things you don't know about, forgot, or rewrote? But there is more. What about those memories that linger, those woulda, coulda, shoulda things? I would have done or said this or that if only. I could have said or done this or that if only. I should have if only. You thought you were doing the right thing, but misspoke or misunderstood. Frustrated, we flew off the handle. Moments where we stood at the edge of a situation, misstepped, and fell into the muck and mire, the abyss of regret. When I led Zen Koan's classes for Bright Dawn, I began telling everyone to gather all their woulda, coulda, shouldas, take them mentally down the hall in their mind and make them comfortable, telling them they'll be back later. That's hard to do in everyday life. I've talked about how others may have influenced us, but if we go through our mirror, our looking glass, out into how our interactions may or may not have influenced others. We are not perfect people. I can't stress that enough. We make mistakes. We did the best we could, as Steve Zeek told us a few weeks back when he talked about parenting on Father's Day. But despite all the counsels to the contrary, we still kind of believe we are supposed to be perfect in some way. Still think we could have done something better, maybe even finding excuses or circumstances to prove it. To prove it wasn't our fault. Or we just push ourselves over the edge into despair. Think we failed, that we're a failure. Maybe there was no reason and we are left in a despair of confusion. I'd like to tell you about 3 incidents from my life when I found myself on the edge, and maybe what I learned there. From 1972 to 1975, I would spend the whole month of October staying with 3 20-something gals in Orlando, Florida. Good friends. 2 were supervisors in Disney World, so there were a lot of free passes. 3rd visit, my last visit, we went to Daytona Beach, where there were no lifeguards. Walking out on the sandbar, my friends kept getting nibbled by the fish or stuck with drifting sea urchin needles. So they went back on the beach. I was having a great time, so I went out until the water was chest high. I remember thinking, gee, it looks like a storm is brewing out there, just as a huge wave came up, way over my head. I felt the sand, then pebbles, stone, rock, and then I tumbled over the edge into blackness. My ears hurt, so I knew I was pretty deep in the water. I had no idea which way it was up, so I started swimming. It wasn't long before I thought I'd better check and see if I'm swimming the right way. And I stopped, just letting myself go, resting. Sure enough, I started to rise in the opposite direction. I giggled to myself, thinking what a schmuck I was, and swam back in the right direction. It took a while, but I finally broke the surface, sputtering and breathing heavily. Looking around, I saw the tiny figures of my friends on the beach, and lazily backstroked towards them. When I finally got within earshot, I heard them all shouting, "Get out of the water! There's a hootin' shark circling you!" The rolling water kept me from seeing it. all the way back to their house, the only thing they could talk about was how amazing it was to see me run on the surface of the water like that. I have two takeaways from that encounter. Don't giggle underwater like I did. It hurts, and you need those bubbles of air. When you don't know what direction you need to go, just let it all go and rest before acting. Second story. I was an orderly during most of the 70s at the old Columbia Hospital across the street from Sandberg Hall's UW Milwaukee. I met, dated, and became pretty serious with a student nurse. I called her one Friday night, and since we were both working that weekend, of course, we were always short-staffed, we talked. It was late, and I said I would see her Monday. 6:30 on the morning of that Monday, I got a call from a student nurse saying they had to carry my Phyllis over to ER. They thought she'd had a heart attack. She was 20 years old at the time. The world stopped. She died 3 days later. I was devastated. When I called my parents, my mom said, "Well, thank goodness she didn't leave you any kids." And when I wanted to talk to my dad, she said, "Oh, he's too busy reading the paper right now." I was one of her pallbearers on that icy, cold March day in Manitowoc. Her sisters and I exchanged letters for some months until we all decided it was time to move on. It wasn't long before a doctor and a friend, Dr. Dieterle, pulled me aside one night at work and said, "We have to talk." I hadn't realized I needed that talk at the time as much as I did. But still, I've been haunted for almost 50 years by thoughts of, was it something I said during that last phone call? Could I have? Should I have? I only found out in the past few years that her mother and another sister had died at a young age from a heart condition that they had. That piece of information helped me understand what happened and not blame myself. It helped me find some compassion for myself. A few years after Phyllis died, I met Patty, the love of my life. Time moved on, and two boys entered our lives. Our first son, Andy, was born 4 years after we were married. Our second son, Tristan, was born almost 8 years later. Remember when I said that everything I learned about not raising children? Well, I adhered to that. I wanted to be, and I was with them as much as I could, helping when I was needed. They became my best friends. I had a lot of good years as a parent, some challenges, but a lot of them good. Then, in the early night hours of July 12th, 2018, my son Andy took his own life. Not seeing him or hearing him on his usual morning stirrings, we forced ourselves into his room. We hadn't heard the gunshot. He'd made his own silencer and apparently knew what he was doing. He had been in the liver transplant program at Freighter, having destroyed his liver from alcoholism. Andy had related to me maybe a year earlier that he had developed a tumor on his liver and that his doctor told him that if it continued to grow before they could find a transplant, that he would be kicked out of the program. When I called his doctor sometime after that terrible morning, he left a voice message. "I'm very sorry for your loss. I wish we could have done something more for your son." Reverend Dina came over after. She was informed through neighborhood contacts. Warm words, hugs, the gift of prayer shawls from our prayer shawl ministry. When Jennifer visited, warm words, hugs, and then she sat down with me and we talked. There was a traditional Japanese method of repairing broken pottery with gold or silver powder called kintsugi. The word kintsugi literally translates to golden joinery or golden repair. The process involves using Japanese lacquer, urushi, to reattach broken pieces of pottery and then painting them and decorating the joints with powdered gold, silver, or platinum. The result is a gold seam where the cracks were, and the pottery can be continued to be used. Reverend Jennifer did that to me. Her kind, warm words mended my shattered heart like that, leaving just enough open for the light of memory to flow. My response, I told her I'd never forgive her for what she'd done. I tried to explain what I meant then and to others since. It's hard. But Jennifer, my friend, I will attempt an explanation for you. Life, as I see it, is a confusion, a series of events unfolding before us that we are born into as pages that ache for words that we ourselves write. How we react to those events, create them, but mixed in among them are other pages, other entries of influences and actions of different lives intermingling with us. I will never forgive you and your words intermingling with my neat little story, my story, when I needed them most. You made me realize that I needed more than myself at the time. You made me realize that I needed Dr. Dieterle all those years ago, and that sometimes we can't do it alone. I cannot forgive you messing with the pages of my life. My never forgiving you is the only way I can express my confusion at the time, and your literal lifting me out of it, sharing with me in it. Some things go beyond words. Thank you, my friend. You made me realize I could not survive this terrible loss by myself. I needed to receive compassion from others. I needed to have compassion for myself. I needed to admit that life is not a neat little story and that I am not an island. John Donne once said, "No man is an island, entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main." And what if we are the ones at the edge, falling into addiction, wanting out of it, thinking of suicide, in despair, and we just can't go on anymore? That's especially when we need other people, when we need to ask for help, when we need to receive compassion. When you stand at your edge, not knowing what to do, shouting across the abyss of your despair and only getting echoes, sit down, be quiet. Just listen to the sounds around you. Wait for the calmness of your heart. But what if your heart refuses to calm down? What if you just keep shouting across the abyss and hearing only those echoes? It is your own self telling you, echoing back to you, to open to someone to talk. Call a friend and talk. Just talk. No need to mention your torment. Sometimes that's all you need. Your friend may notice the feeling of your voice and respond accordingly. No shame in that. I've been told from others, I have no friends. I live alone. I can't afford professional help. But there are compassionate organizations out there for you. AA, 988 Suicide Hotline, and of course, our own pastoral care associates and our wonderful ministers. Let me add, though, when you say I don't have any friends, yes, you do. We all have that friend. It's us. It's our own selves. In the beginning of my little rambling this morning, I said, do I really know who I am? And that I should know. I've lived pretty closely with myself for 75 years. You are your own best friend. Think of how we interact with our friends. Do they have faults? Sure they do. But we accept them anyway for the comfort and friendship they give us. We help each other when we're down. Treat yourself, your own forever self, the same way. Be compassionate with yourself. On a phone session with my sensei, the late Reverend Koyo Kubose, we talked about all the times we screwed up. When he suddenly said, Nana Karobi, Yaoki. My, made him laugh and ask forgiveness for suddenly blurting out like that. Then he offered an explanation. The proverb, Nana Karobi, Yaoki, means fall down 7 times, stand up 8. How many times you fall is not important, he said. It means that you always get up again. It means choosing to never give up hope and to always strive for more. It means that your focus isn't on the reality in front of you, but on a greater vision that may not yet be reality, the reality you can make. There is also the underlying notion that we learn to walk by falling. I remember commenting, I understand that, but Sensei, I have so many bruises. And I started laughing. He joined me with his deep roar of a laugh. We laughed a lot together over the phone. His wife, Adrian, also Japanese, was also my phone companion. Since I was volunteered a number of times a year to record a Dharma talk for Koyo Sensei's use in his weekly Sunday phone services. And she would record my talk. One of the last phone conversations I had with Adrian, before she died of breast cancer, I called her Sensei. She was shocked. Nobody's ever called me that before. I said, well, you know, remember that phone call when you told me to hang on? You came back on the line and told me you had to brush away a tarantula scratching on your front door. That was a Zen koan, a teaching. No swatting or killing that tarantula. It only wanted shade, the coolness in your house. It needed your help. You gave it to that tarantula. No questions, no thinking, no judgment. The Caboses lived in Corso, California, which is a dry area not too far from Yosemite National Park. When you were born, you were lying down and crying. But when you were able to stand up, then you were able to stand up with the support of the people around you in your life. It is said that this first standing up is the inception of 7 falls and 8 rises. But in between those falls and standing up, rest a bit. Give yourself some time. Check in with yourself and listen. Even in all the heat of this morning, the birds are singing. Isn't it wonderful? Thank you. Thank you. My closing words are from No One is Alone by Stephen Sondheim. Sometimes people leave you halfway through the wood. Others may deceive you. You decide what's good. You decide alone. But no one is alone. People make mistakes. Fathers, mothers, people make mistakes holding to their own, thinking they're alone. Honor their mistakes. Everybody makes one another's terrible mistakes. Things will come out right now. We can make it so. Someone is on your side. No one is alone. Thank you. Peace.